logical reasoning and guessing and checking to see if these three statements are always true, sometimes true, or never true. So we talked about what kind of numbers you need to check for n. You need to check positive numbers, negative numbers, decimals, fractions before you decide that something is always true, sometimes true, or never true. And what we found in class is that all of these were sometimes true. If we chose a negative number for n, then sometimes, like if we picked a negative 9 for n, then negative 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3, and negative 3 is greater than negative 9. But if we picked a positive 9, 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 3 is not greater than 9. And then for this one, we found that if n is positive, okay, so like 10 is greater than negative 10, but if n is negative, negative 10 is not greater than the opposite of negative 10, which is positive 10. So we found an example for each of these, that one that made it true, one that made it false, and that makes them sometimes true. And then this one at first glance seems like it's never going to be true, because one we're multiplying by 5 and one we're multiplying by negative 5. So if n is positive, this definitely is positive, and this is the opposite. If n is negative, then this is negative, and this becomes positive, because a negative times a negative is a positive, and they're opposite. So at first you guys thought that was never true, but then somebody said, oh, but what if n is 0? And if n is 0, 5 times 0 is 0, and negative 5 times 0 is 0, and now we have a case where they are equal. So all three of these were sometimes true. So really make sure you think it through. All right, we checked your homework. And then nobody really likes working with fractions in an equation this. So what we talked about is how do you get rid of or clear a fraction today. So the first thing that you want to do is get rid of this subtracting 350. And we do that by adding 350 to both sides of the equation. So the first thing you want to do is add that 350 to get 720. And then, let me go back here. And then how do you clear the fraction? You guys came up with it. You multiply every term by a common multiple of the denominators. So what's a common multiple of 2 and a common multiple of 3? Because if x was 2, we'd have 2 halves, and that'd be 1. But if x is 3, we'd have 3/3, and that would be 1. But we have to have something that works for both 2 and 3, and that would be 6. So after we get rid of that, we got rid of that 350 by adding 350 to both sides. And then we were here in the blue. 350 plus 270 is 620. And then the multiplier we used, the green is us checking our work, but the multiplier we used was 6, because 6 times x divided by 2 is 3x. And 6 times x divided by 3 is 2x. And now I have integers, and no longer do I have fractions. And 6 times 620 is 3,720. And now I can combine my like terms, 5x, and 5x equals 3,720. And when I divide both sides by 5, I get 744. So to show your check, you take out x and put 744 in for x. So 744 divided by 2 is 372. And 744 divided by 3 is 248. And when we add these together, we get 620. So the left side is 620 and the right side is 620. And so we have done our check, and cha-ching, we know that we're correct. So that's got all the steps in there. Okay, then we had another problem. This was the problem. How do you clear the fractions? What you want to do is find a common, find a common multiple of the denominators. But first get rid of that 50. So we want to add 50 to both sides. So in red, after we do that, we have x over 4 plus x over 5 equals 2, because 50 minus 48 is 2. And then our common multiple of 4 and 5 is 20. And some of you weren't sure. Some of you were multiplying 20 by 4. But remember, 20 over 1 is the same thing as 20. So it's 20 times x divided by 4, or 20 divided by 4 times x. And that gives us 5x. And 20 divided by 5 is 4. And 4 times x is 4x. And 2 times 20 is 40. So we get 9x is 40. And when we divide 40 by 9, we get a repeating decimal, 4.4 repeating. And we just talked about how it's a lot easier to know that that's 4 and 4/9 if you're going to do a check. Because how do you show a check for 4.4 repeating? You can't ever really get all of x in there. But if I put 4 and 4/9 here, I could absolutely check my work. All right, then I had you try another one with your group and on your own. And again, how do you clear the fractions? You got to multiply every term by the common multiple of the denominators. So first thing is to add 8, and you have 28 here. So the problem becomes x over 5 plus x over 2 equals 28. And then you all knew to clear the fractions by multiplying each term by 10. So 10/5 is 2, so we get 2x. 10/2 is 5, 5x. And 28 times 10 is 280. Combine your like terms, 7x is 280, and divide both sides by 7, and you get 40. And when we did our check, 40, take out x, put in 40, that's 8. That's 20. 8 plus 20 is 28. Minus 8 is 20, so absolutely you know it's right. All right, and then just, sorry, there's an announcement. So for homework, you just need to complete your 3 hours in ALEKS and your 15 topics. You have a quiz next week after we do the second half of this lesson on Monday. So your quiz is Wednesday. And then we're going to start your project on Wednesday. So make sure you have your spaghetti here. And the quiz on Wednesday is on lessons 3.6, 3.7, and 3.8. And that's it. Have a great weekend.